Brian, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thanks, Ken. Excited to be with you.
Yeah, we have some mutual friends, Nick Bradley being one of them. It's kind of how I found you. I was really intrigued by your story on there. Do you mind retelling it? Like kind of tell us a little bit about your background and how you became the guy you are today, and I'll kind of interject along the way.
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I didn't share. I was talking about this yesterday with some friends of mine. Is both my parents, fortunately, still alive, 80 and 77, and my mom worked at the city for like 30 years. And that's always I share a lot of things about her because she taught me things like compassion and taking care of people. And it was the house that people got to come to, Ken, like all of my boys that we grew up playing soccer and all my friends, like it was the place to come over, hang out, safe place. Even if you weren't doing things you were supposed to do,
Yeah.
you would come over to the Covey
You
house.
had the fridge, you had the fridge full of food and the good snack cabinet.
Oh, all of that. And she would make food. And of course, you had the sports, like the basketball goal. And,
That's cool.
we just have fun with that stuff. And, I learned a lot from her. And then my dad went back later in life and he was actually counseling in the prisons and he was a counselor there, a pastor, went back and got his master's and doctorate later and kind of took that entrepreneurial journey, but always hard work and willing to sacrifice the short term for the long term goal. And even to this day, he's still working, counseling pastors, troubled youth, marriage counseling, all those things. And I was the younger brother. My older brother Lee is 5 years older, so I was always my competitive side was birthed out of that of you're chasing your older sibling. I wanted
Sure.
to play with the big boys, right? And so I always had somebody to look up to and to go after and to compete, which is what birthed soccer. Man, I share so many stories and lessons from that. A lot of times, Ken, is because a lot of times on the field, you learn about who you are, you learn about people's character,
Right.
and a lot of those coaches early on in my life taught me lessons that maybe I didn't learn in the moment, especially as a teenager,
Sure.
but carried on. And I was blessed enough to play with the Olympic team, and I was on the U-23 national team, and had some really cool stuff to go play overseas. And only share all that as just some perspective of as a teenager, I got to see a lot of things and got to experience life at an early age. And I think that's given me some wisdom. Now, as a dad of three, my wife and I have been married 21 years and have been in the real estate and mortgage space for over 2 decades and still learning,
Wow.
man. I am still on the journey.
That soccer trajectory that you had, what I mean, was it quick? Was it a slow build? Was it, 1 year you kind of grew up and got awesome, or like what happened? What did that look like?
So I share this pivotal moment that happened for me is I was actually struggling with being overweight as a kid. And I was still athletic, but I was truthfully I was overweight, and I think
Yeah.
that held me back. And I was fortunate enough. Our pediatrician was also my basketball coach. I played AAU basketball and traveled. That was my two sports, was basketball and soccer. And I remember him telling me, "Is like what you're eating and what you're doing and where you're headed with what runs in your family. If you don't change something, Brian, if you don't get control of your health now, it's not good, man. You're going to
Right.
have diabetes, and you're going to have all this hypertension. You have all these things that your life you will be dealing with forever." That was an awakening and a wake up call. And that happened, Ken, right before I had the breakthrough. And I always share the story because for a lot of us, I was given the truth, which I kind of knew, man. I was walking around with two t-shirts at the pool. Like I was uncomfortable. I wouldn't take my
Yeah.
shirt off. And imagine as a 13-year-old boy and all that. Like you're figuring out like puberty's hitting and you're like, I don't even know what's going on. And somebody was honest enough to tell me what was really happening and to say, hey, there's another way. And that birthed what I would say still today is a fire and a drive, this competitive edge in me that I started to wake up every morning at 5:30, go run before school. I started eating turkey and chicken breasts and probably wrecked my family. I remember my
Yeah.
parents going, we like to eat these other foods and
Yeah.
you're bringing in all this healthy stuff. But I think it was the spark we all needed to get our health in order. And from that was when the breakthrough, and I was actually invited out with the U15 and then the U17 national team. And I do say that was probably something that was missing that I wasn't even aware of. Being a great athlete, but not having that side dialed in, there were so many effects that held me back.
And it's obviously stuck with you. I'm curious because you're only 13. You're hearing from a pediatrician. Most people at 13, I would think, would be crushed. And in today's day and age, the parents might even go, "How dare you talk to my kid that way?" Even though it was just a little bit of tough love. Were you able to accept it that way? I mean, it sounds like you took action on it, but how did it hit when you first heard it? Was it just a wake up call? Like, was no one else in your life kind of giving you that information?
When you know the truth
Yeah.
and somebody says it and you're like, And at 13, let's be real, like I didn't know, and I still don't know how I processed it, but I
Yeah.
do know this is my competitiveness overrode my ego. And so what I can tell you is looking at it, knowing where I wanted to go with my basketball career, my soccer career. And when he framed it up as, hey, this is holding you back from getting to the next level. Imagine if you were 20, 30 pounds lighter and eating healthy and the amount of energy you'd have and just how
Right.
you'd feel. I think he did a great job of framing it. And I'll applaud my parents and even my brother coming on that journey of like, okay, this is what we're all going to do, right? And you think about environment, especially as leaders, is we then committed as a family. And so kudos to my parents because you're right. They could have been like, you're saying that about my baby boy.
Right.
But the truth is, Ken, I look back and I think the number was I was nearing 200 pounds. I ended up over the next year, year and a half, dropping almost 40 pounds. I was
Wow.
running more than I'd ever run. And then I go, hmm. And then I got better and my confidence went up. So you look at that and say,
Yeah, that was the tipping point for sure.
was it. That was it. So I share that story often with people as, they see me now and we joke about this as fitness has become something as an anchor in our family and my kids. And if people were
Sure.
to see me now, they're like, oh yeah, you've just probably had it easy, these things and that. And I go, man, let me tell you, it wasn't always that way. I got a
Right.
wake up call like we all um, hopefully get at some point in our life in some area to move forward and become the best version of ourselves.
Totally. I mean, I think I had a meeting with a couple of young leaders on my team today, very young, like mid 20s, but they're both just rock stars, and they're developing fast. And there was I don't mind sharing this. We had to let someone go today, which doesn't happen very often in our company. But before we did that, I wanted to talk to these young leaders about the difference between being nice and being kind. And nice is not addressing the issue. Nice is avoidance, I think, when it comes to leadership. Kind is actually telling them the truth at your own discomfort, right? Kind is no one wants to hear this, but it's what they need to hear so that they can move on with their lives. They can make this area better. And when we met with this person on our team, and kudos to you if you're listening. I'm not going to say your name, but when we met with this member on our team, that was probably time for him to go. He was so, I think, appreciative of the transparency as we were too. So it became a very like, it wasn't so much, you're not getting it done, you're out of here. It was more like, is this really, I mean, just be honest, is this really the right fit? And he paused. He was going to go in for a typical reaction, like, well, yeah, I've been doing, and then he went, it's not long term a good fit, right? It made us a little emotional because we're like, it's such a good guy, but it's just not the right fit. Do you know what I mean? And but that to me was the difference between being nice and kind. Nice is the avoidance, right? Nice is the
Right.
don't rock the boat. Let's not have the difficult conversations, but it's actually kind. What your pediatrician did was kind, to give you that feedback.
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of us probably struggle with as the people pleasers and the people out there that you want people to like you, you want them to feel good. But you're right, along the journey, when you're truthful with people and give them feedback no one else is willing to give,
Yeah.
the respect and trust you earn. Because I've had people in my life like that where they tell you everything you want to hear, but then the bomb blows up and then they tell you the real truth they've been holding in,
Right.
and no one wants that. And
Right.
that's what a great leader does is give feedback along the way so that when it does come to that, you've actually planted seeds and it's not a surprise.
Totally, totally. So along the soccer journey, so you get thin, you get fast, I'm sure. Faster. You were probably fast already to be at that level. Um, and it evolves, right? So you're going through high school and just what is that? Are you from, and I apologize if you said it in the opener. I know you're in Tennessee. Is that where you're from?
Originally from Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a little pocket there. Man, I look back now, we were blessed. Our coach for our club team played on the Polish national team, and we had several professional players, even at our high school. Like we were fortunate, Ken, of when I look back now and I share these stories, it's not what you see today. I think people are more spread out. Like when I watch my
Hmm.
daughter play, like you've got a lot of great schools and they'll come and go. And our school at Houston was one of those like top nationally ranked across the country, and both men's and women's for a while. They came and went. I mean, we won 3 state championships out of my 4 years. That gives you perspective in Tennessee. There's a
Wow.
lot of great schools here.
Yeah.
And to have that consistency and to people go through and then the club team, what was there. So I share that just because there were some amazing, talented people coming through, but also at that time, the MLS, professional soccer, just started in 96. And so
Right.
many of us, I was graduating high school and this league was coming out. So a lot was changing and a lot was happening. And so we were somewhat on the forefront of change in US soccer.
And getting visibility along the way to move you into those next levels. How did that move you into the Olympics? What does that look like? How does that process go of being considered?
Yeah, so I wish I could tell you there was this amazing story that I got to go to the Olympics and all, but I think it's
Yeah,
actually a more powerful story that we just had a friend that this happened to them as they made it all the way through camp. And when they make their final selection to go to CONCACAF or to the Olympics, I did not make the final team.
sure.
And so it was one of those moments I look back and it did wreck me, because it's one of those you're like, you're just going for this dream and then you don't make it there. And I look back now and go, it's a life lesson of you can train, you can put in the work, but there may be somebody further along and better than you.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean you need to quit. It just means they're further along in that journey. And I'm thankful that I had people around me and my coach saying, hey, take a couple of weeks off, take a month off, like just process this. Cause as a teenager, you're just trying to figure
right.
out, do I want to play soccer? You got emotions of, well, that coach was wrong. And, what did I do? And all this stuff. And I was fortunate to have great parents and great coaches and anchors. It's like, man, take some time. And I think the lesson within that, if you're listening to that today, is whatever you might have going on is sometimes the thing is you don't need to quit, but you need to step away for a little bit and then
Yeah,
rethink about why is it that you're chasing this dream? What is it? And reconnect to what it is that's actually driving you towards what your goal is. I've used that several times, Ken, to go back and go, I may not be there yet.
yeah,
What's the gap? And I often look and go, man, who's willing to tell me? It's why I hire coaches to work in my own life. Who's willing to tell me the truth, to tell me I have this gap over here or a blind spot and go, hey, Brian, you could get there, but you're going to have to do all this, or you're going to have to become this type of leader.
right,
And all along my journey, I think that's just another, again, anchor point for me to go, you can train hard, you can be putting in all the reps and all the things. But a lot of times you look at the best, they have a coach that guides them to the next level of
sure.
what's there. And I'll share this with you is what I realized is the people at that very next level, and I found this in the pro ranks, there was a mental toughness and a differentiator for some of them that just separated some of them a little bit. Just
Yeah,
look, we could all pass the ball, receive the ball. We had skills. We were fast. We were strong. You put that many good players on a field, what is going to separate you? It's your
right,
attitude that they see when you make a mistake and how do you respond? It's your attitude off the field. It's what you're eating off the field. It's how you train. It's how you study. It's what the game film, like I could go on. And I didn't have some of those parts to my game. While I was gifted in some areas and athletic and I trained hard, there were people at another level I'd never seen.
right.
They had these skills. I think that's what we're always seeking is how do we improve where we are and where we want to go?
I interviewed one of Kobe Bryant's trainers from back in the day. And Kobe obviously just one of the in what you're talking about just epitomizes like the work ethic, the focus, the almost to a point where, some thought he alienated teammates and some Michael Jordan's the same way, right? But it's this level where they're just so hyper focused, right, on what they want. But you said something earlier in that statement too that I think is important. Is sometimes you just got to take a step back, and I don't know what this ended up being for you exactly, but sometimes you got to go, well, am I just going for this for the sake of going for it now, or is it what I really want? If it's what you really want, then great. Find the tools that you didn't have before. Find the mentors that you didn't have before. But sometimes you got to go, do I really want this? I mean, I think in what we do, our main business is leadership talent placement. And, a lot of times I'll be talking to someone, and so many of us get on our career or business trajectory always looking for the next thing, right? I'm a manager. I want to become a director. I'm a director. I want to become a VP. And it's like, well, all of those things come with different things, right? Changes in work-life balance, geography, and everything else. And do you really want that? Like reverse engineer what a week in the life of doing that means. It's kind of why I'm not running marathons anymore. I don't really want to do any 20 milers right now. But yeah, I loved what you said there.
Yeah, the sacrifices. And speaking of Kobe, I've worked pretty close and several times with Tim Grover, and people know Tim and Coach Covey and MJ and some of the greats out there, D Wade. And, some things that Grover shared with me is related. And I wish I had somebody like that earlier in my career, because he talks about those seasons of being obsessed and what you had to give up. And I was talking to a young athlete the other day, and having to give up on the parties, having to not go to the Friday night get-togethers when people are getting together. And I'm out training for, like a Cooper test. 2 miles in 12 minutes was our college test. And I remember the things that people just look at you like you're weird and you're different. And
Yeah.
I would just encourage them, if you're listening to this and you really do have that desire, what you said, Ken, and that is your dream and you're
Yeah.
all in on it, you're
Yeah.
going to have to be a little bit weird and a little bit different. And I would skip
Yes.
the parties. I wouldn't be out drinking with some of the people. And I remember it leaves you feeling a little bit like an outsider and like depressed at times, because you're like, man, everybody's doing all that. But I will tell you, I don't look back and regret it, because I know that gave me an edge over people that weren't as obsessed and committed as I was. And I think that's what allowed me to continue to play as long as I did, is there were just times that I was willing to sacrifice a short-term fun enjoyment and
Yeah.
go, man, this is my dream and nobody's getting in the way of that thing. Like,
Yeah, that's
sorry.
so important, because I think we are hardwired as human beings for connection, right? And just the act of having such a audacious goal, that alone, if you're really serious about pursuing it, and it doesn't have to be an athletic endeavor, right? It could be a business endeavor where
Yeah.
someone's just all in on, like, I'm going to build XYZ, or I'm going to do this and that. And by doing that, I'm going to sacrifice all these other things, or backseat some relationships, or do whatever. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing to do. It's up to the individual, but yeah, you got to be ready to be the weirdo a little bit, right? You got to be ready to be on the sidelines and be comfortable going, this is for a reason, and it's probably hopefully not forever, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
where did your soccer journey, because I mean it didn't end there, so tell us where you went from there.
Yeah, I was fortunate. So obviously getting to play at those levels, a lot of recruiting happened for college, and I started looking at several schools, like a lot of people do, and you're looking at all the places. I'd actually committed at UConn, and then the coach at the time was retiring right as I was going to be coming in. That kind of left me a little uneasy, because you're going because of the coach, also the
Sure.
program and things. And I always say God has an interesting way of intervening. I hadn't really looked at staying home at Memphis. They were a rising program. One of the goalkeepers that was there, I had looked up to. He was several years older than me. Some other people that had signed there from like Brazil and Mexico and all these people. I'm going, oh, this is like a top 25 program now. And all laid out where they said, you know what, Brian, you can come in, you can compete for a spot. Didn't guarantee it, didn't tell me you're going to get it or anything, but you could come in. One of my deciding factors was I wanted to compete and play. I
Yeah.
decided, look, I may have a shot to go on one of these top 10 programs, but the likelihood of me playing that first year, even second year, was probably slim. There were people
Right.
ahead of me and that were phenomenal. And I decided playing was more important based on where I was with the national team and training. And so I stayed at Memphis, which turned out to be phenomenal. I was able to start all 4 years. I was able to become captain my junior and senior year, taught me leadership lessons, obviously great business school and some things there. And I share all that as you got to pick your lane. There were
Yeah.
people that would have questioned wherever I went. If I went to UConn, they'd be like, man, why are you going up there? It's cold and it's, this, that. Stay home. People are going to judge you because of that. Once you commit and you find out what's best for you, just like in leadership or a company or starting this venture, you got to be all in and trust that's where you need to be. And I believe that's where I needed to be. Was I wanted to play. I'm
Right.
a competitor. And that for me was the fire that made me a better athlete. And I was surrounded by great people. And that ended up fueling then getting back on the national team with the U23s later. I think part of that was because I did go to a school that I could play, and I
Yeah.
didn't miss out on seasons of being on the sideline.
Very cool. And where did that take you in your career? Where'd you go from there?
So I got drafted out to play professionally. Trained a few months out in Colorado with the Rapids, and then I got signed here in Nashville, which is how we years later ended up with our families. Loved the town, and got to play here for a couple seasons, and just loved getting to train here. And I will tell you, I still have friends from the team. I have people that I met, and I was able to play there as well. And for many people that are, especially if they make it to that professional ranks, what you talked about earlier, Ken, is I got into it, played for a little while, and I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do anymore.
Yeah.
Traveling, the little bit of money that they're paid, at that time, the league was still very, very new. And I wanted to go back. I'd promised my parents I'd finish my degree and I only had a few courses left. So I came back, finished that. Interesting enough, couldn't find a job for like 6 to 9 months. I think it was almost 9 by the time I started. And so I was working coaching, got my coaching license, thought I would go that way, helping my dad with his business, doing individual private training for soccer with people, like doing anything and everything. And again, I think God intervened because during that season, I was able to meet my now bride and we got engaged, married, all of those things, which was really, that was my dream. As I always saw myself being this person, getting married, having a career, having kids. And it just happened a little bit different timing than I thought that would have.
Yeah.
Um, but man, best decision. I look
How to
back and
get how to get married young and start a family and all that. How did that, because I have my own stories of I got married really young, but um how did that kind of propel the next phase of life for you, or did it?
yeah, so some context. So I was actually just turning 25
Hmm.
the same month that we got married. So I look at it and go, I was young, but I still, I wasn't too young. Like I know people have gotten married younger and later. We were probably like many people, we weren't able to have our first child until 30
Yeah.
and had to go through all of that stuff to get to that point and everything. We'd actually moved. I got relocated with my job in corporate America, moved to Tampa, Florida from Memphis, away from family. And Ken, wouldn't you know, it was in '07. And I'm in the mortgage and real
Mm,
estate and all of the things. And we're having our first child. My job is getting eliminated. The market is crashing. I'm looking around going, I've never seen or experienced this. And most of the people working with me hadn't either.
right.
And we were then fortunate enough about 18 and a half months later to have our second child. So we had our daughter and then our first son, and all in a matter of the world around me and what I knew collapsing and
Yeah. So you're
this
like
trajectory.
2007 to 2009, having two kids, losing a job in an industry that's not going to rebound for years, probably not fully rebound. So what'd you do?
Huh. Well, I remember it like it was just the other day. Is I called after we had done the interviews and just kind of insight into it is we're doing these panel interviews. If you ever watch, remember The Apprentice?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So people, I just frame it up because I would go into these interviews and we're all several of us that were displaced and our jobs were eliminated. We would go in and reapply for jobs. And you would have a panel interview like The Apprentice that people are firing questions at you.
Right.
You're having to come in with a presentation. You're basically selling them on why you're the best person that's there. I called a manager that was 2 levels above me. And I said, look, I got 2 kids. You know what's going on. I'm willing to do anything and everything that you need. What can I do, even on a temporary basis? Because you know the value, you know what I'm willing to do. Fortunately, he'd been mentoring me on the side. And this is where I tell everybody is relationship capital. You don't know you need someone
Yeah.
until you need someone.
Yeah.
And I share that story because I believe the only reason that I was really able to get to the yes was they knew me. I had the relationship capital built up, and I said, I'm willing to do anything. Well, be careful what you ask for because I was on a plane and traveling every week. Now, my wife, that was an ICU nurse, is staying home with our kids. I'm traveling all the way to the panhandle, and my job, Ken, super sexy. What you dealt with earlier, I was actually the one closing branches,
Yeah.
laying off people, and many of them, remember my age, they are
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
older
They're
than
a
me
whole
and further.
generation older than you. Yeah.
Oh, when you're the 30-year-old and you're coming in, 32-year-old, and you're coming in letting people go that are in their 50s that have more experience, and you're the one going in. But I will say that was also a blessing because you learn how to have care, as you said, be kind and compassionate. And many of them, my job had just been eliminated. And so I could relate in some way of what's there and what I was able to do and secure that. And so I went through all of that. And then I was able to, when the market started to move, people saw what I was willing to do
You were
and just
already
the way I
there. Yeah.
handled it. They're like, we want you on the team. And I was able to secure another role. Then a few years later, we moved to Tennessee. And so I share all that because you might be in that situation and you cannot give up.
Yeah.
And you got to have relationship capital. And then number three, whatever role you're put in, do so much beyond what's asked of you that people just go, we got to have that person on our team
Right.
somewhere, somehow. And I believe, much like in sports, is I was that person that was willing to do whatever it took, be a leader on and off the field, and just show up and make that place, team, whatever you want to say in that moment, better.
Yeah.
than it would have been without me. That was always my goal.
I think one of the other key things, and this goes back to probably how your coaches felt about you, how that mentor and that company felt about you, was, there are a lot of mentors out there. There's a lot of people willing to mentor other people, people that have been fortunate in their own lives. And if they have, they probably had great mentors. So there's a natural, the law of reciprocity where they want to give back, right? But you've got to be a great mentee, and a great mentee takes the advice, runs with it, does it quicker, faster, better if possible, or comes back and gets more information, or they don't get mentored by that person anymore, period. So everybody's always like, well, I would love to have learned from the people that you learned from. And it's like, well, would you have done the things that Brian did had you been asked to do them? Because the mentor will go away, and rightfully so, though, not because they're not compassionate, but because you're not ready, and they'd rather work with somebody that is, right? So it's great that you've had that throughout your career, it sounds like. So that was really, I mean, other than the rocky beginning, which led to you having to scrap it out and hang on, that was really the beginning of where you are now, was kind of that rebound play that you made by hanging in there and doing the right work. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And the lessons, look, a lot of people, you just nailed something I think people miss is a lot of people just want this trajectory in their career just to go up, up, up. And they just think every year I'm going to get better. I'm going to acquire more
Yeah.
knowledge, acquire more relationships. The reality is, I think you need some of those years that you get knocked down in a season
Yeah.
that you just go, man, I'm absolutely getting the crap kicked out of me. And how you respond and the character you build, the next time you get knocked down, you realize it doesn't hurt as bad. And you know you're not going to die. Like, I know that's an extreme, but sometimes we just put these crazy stories
Yeah.
of the world is going to completely fall apart and all these things are going to happen. Well, I've seen the bottom
Right.
several times and gone, didn't die.
Right.
And I pretty much lost everything, but I had my family, had my health, and had things that I could say I'm grateful for. And we don't always have those, but there's things that you can be grateful for and go, well, I have this. How do I build off of what I actually have and be grateful for that? And what I found, even the most successful people that I try to surround myself with, they are grateful, even in the stages they're in their life, of all of the seasons they've had and where they are. And what you'll find with people that are still struggling with this, doesn't matter how much money they've made, what position they've achieved in leadership, all of that. There's just this ungratefulness. And I hate to say it that way, but it's the truth of like, they think things are owed or the ungratefulness comes out and
Yeah.
people will see that. And that's the leader that I've aspired to be, is just be grateful, because not every season is promised to be flourishing and growing. And just, we're coming out of a year like that in the mortgage industry. And I can just
Sure.
relate to people where I'm like, I've been through this.
Yeah, I've been through a lot worse than this, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, this is bad, but it's not 2008, is it? Where it just stopped essentially. So yeah, tell me about the buildup since then, because you went from scrappy young mentee, which is from a year's standpoint, what, 15 years ago, roughly, right? Give or take. Not when you started in the industry, but kind of, when you guys started, when it started coming back, to now being really a powerhouse in that industry. And like, what was that evolution like?
Yeah. So I spent almost 13 years in corporate America at a big bank. And I realized at some point we just didn't align up anymore. Where I wanted to go, the team I wanted to build, and all of that, wearing the suit and tie every day and all of that. Part of my growth was evolving and recognizing, okay, this may not be the spot for me. And that's a tough spot because I was actually brought up. My mom retired after almost 30 years at the same place. I was like,
Sure.
I actually came in believing that you could work at one company and retire there. Like that,
Yeah.
that's how my mindset. Well, I quickly realized, and I'll credit even my father-in-law, was like, that's just not always true, right? Like that's not the way it's always going to play out, and you're replaceable. And I remember him sharing, he's like, as soon as you leave, they're going to replace you with somebody else.
Yeah.
And I saw that this last week of Nick Saban and one of arguably the best college coaches or coaches,
Sure.
and they're right away they're replacing someone like that. Now I'm setting aside what the results will be and all the different things, but the reality is wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you could be replaced. And I
Yep.
had not thought that way. So that was another gift I was given, is as I left, I was able to move into a larger leadership role because of the results and what we had built. And I went to another company that was smaller on the upswing. And I got to be part of that team where we were about $2 billion the first year. And I think by the time I left, close to $10 billion a year in originations. And throughout that, there were lessons I learned through people, and a lot of travel again came back into my world.
Sure.
uh, that was there. It's only share that story for people of sometimes you got to leave where you are to go chase after what you really want. And what I found out, that was actually the season of growth of almost 4 years. And I got pulled out by a mentor. Ironically enough, Ken, one of the owners had introduced me of my current company, introduced me to the future company I would join because they were not competitors at the time.
Okay.
So you can imagine, you just don't know where things will go. In another 5 years at the new company, and we took it to an IPO, all these different things that I learned there, very techy, very consumer centric, and all these things. And I always share this as I believe what opened that door was my mindset was in many companies, it's not a forever thing anymore. As much as we want it to be. And guys, I am, my wife and I would tell you, being married 21 years, we are loyalists to the sense of like, loyalty is probably to a fault in some areas.
Sure.
When you get in that situation and you feel like, okay, I'm not a fit anymore, or the leadership that's here is we're not aligned up with where they're going, or whatever it might be, you can't be afraid to explore it. You might find
Right.
out you're at the best place in the world for you and stay there. And that gives you confidence to go all in. But you might find out that there's something else out there for you, and not to be afraid of trying that. I think I built the courage through some of those seasons that I had not had before of I'm willing to bet on me. I'm
Yeah.
willing to work on me, and I'm the product and the service, and to go do that. Now, you know that the recruiting side of too many leaders, oftentimes they forget the value they bring, and not chasing their true dreams.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It's like forget it's a combination and they sound like opposite things, but of not recognizing the value they bring, but at the same time thinking that the company needs them more than they do. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, yes, you bring a lot of value, but like you were saying earlier, you're also replaceable. I mean, listen, publicly traded companies, the even with great cultures, the share price dictates a lot of things, right? And even non-public, but if they're owned by private equity or whatever, they're there to make money. And as long as you can help them in that journey and be cost efficient, that someone else can't do it cheaper, then you're probably going to be fine. But it's not forever. More than likely, it's not forever. And you can either be proactive or reactive in that journey. I happened to work for a great corporation for about 14 years, loved it, loved the company, learned a ton there. And it was also time for me to leave when I did. You know what I mean? Like it can be both. You can have a relationship that ends and have it be not only amicable, but really, really positive experience for both sides, you know?
Oh, 100%. And I look back too is what I'm really proud of some of those organizations that I left is I believe they actually got better. Like I left them better than when I found them. And they
Yep.
also were able to change their strategy and say, okay, we got to this point. Now what do we need to do? And recognizing that maybe I'm not the leader to take them to where they want to go with that. But this company over here, I'm the exact leader to help them. And I just started to look at it from a different lens. And you said it is a lot of times the company could benefit. And I've
Yeah.
started to recognize I'm open to what's there, but also being all in the moment of this is my task, this is my mission right now, and let's dominate that.
Totally. So I want to ask you some of your industry insight as we're getting near the end of this, just because I had it as I was
Yeah.
listening to you on a different podcast this morning with our buddy Nick Bradley. Um, where do you see things going right now? I mean, you've been in the industry for a long time. Obviously, I think I read somewhere that 88% of economists, whatever this is worth, feels that there'll be at least three rate reductions in 2024. Do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah, I think they're spot on with it. And you can tell that they overcorrected would be
Yeah.
my statement of that. And I think it was one where you can look at it now and go, okay, now we need to move back. You're already seeing interest rates for mortgages start to come down, and albeit slowly. The latest projection, Fannie Mae even came out yesterday with this, is they're projecting rates to get back into the fives, and whatever that looks like, depending on your credit, loan programs and such there. But I think we're seeing that move. Now, what I would share with people is you need to be mindful of what's happening with rates, because some people are like, well, I just need the rate to be here. Well, what this is going to do is it's going to move all those
Drive
buyers
price.
that have been on the
Oh
sideline,
yeah.
right? And we're already seeing multiple offers. We're already seeing people that are willing to pay full price where there might have been a 5 to 8% discount a month ago. We're already starting to see that
Hmm.
correction happen. And we all know it's just supply and demand, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people want to argue with this, but when you look at the fundamentals, you will see. And I can even look at our neighborhood or use Nashville where we live. When you
Hmm.
have more people come into the market and the inventory is not corrected, and it will not correct itself in the short term,
Right.
not enough houses for the people that want to move. Now, factor that in, Ken, with what's a very unique time of you have, I believe it's 64, 65% of the mortgages are below 4%.
Hmm.
But these people are like, well, I can't move because of my rate. And so we're sharing strategies. If you're listening, what I would share with you is you need to meet with someone like what our team offers, and you need a full picture. And so what we've had people do is, hey, I'm going to rent out this house. Yes, I have a 3% interest rate, but I want to move closer to the schools. I want to be closer to my church. My kids are growing. I need a bigger house, or maybe they want to downsize to a different house. Whatever your reason is, what we've shared is to build wealth. You can look back over time, and this is a proven strategy. Go ahead and rent out that house with the low interest rate. You can get the payment today that probably covers your mortgage plus some, and then start looking for where you want to go. Now you have two homes, you have both the appreciations working for both, you're paying down equity, and you look up in 5 to 10 years, you go, wow, I'm glad I held on to that house that I ran numbers yesterday for someone. I was telling you that $500,000 house, Ken, is going to be worth over $700,000 in
Sure.
the future. You probably can't earn that for most people where they are. They probably can't earn the extra $200,000, $300,000 in the next 5 to 10 years. So this would be a strategy I'd share with people. Knowing all of that, this is why experts and guides, and it's what I study and nerd out on, is I
Yeah.
just want to know how to advise people correctly, but also from my own experience.
I think psychologically, and we're shopping for a second home right now in Phoenix where we used to live. I would shopping is a big word, casually looking, I would say, but
Yeah.
I'm being very aware of this mindset of I think everybody's looking for some intersection where you'll get both the lowest price point and a reduced interest rate, and it's like those two lines are not going to be moving at the same time. They're going to be moving in opposite directions. So rate comes down a half a point, price goes up $30,000, like that kind of thing. Like they're just going to move in opposite directions. So it's like because of exactly what you said. Like it's almost shocking to me. I don't know if it is to you. I'd be curious because you're so connected to it, but we knew there was an inventory problem going into the interest rate thing. And we also knew that things did need to cool off a bit. And like you said, they probably overcorrected. But, you know, I thought houses, especially in certain markets, now I know some have cooled off a lot. I know you live in a spot that was a very big hot spot, and
Mhm.
maybe prices come down 10% or whatever. I don't know the exact numbers in some of these markets like Seattle and even here in Phoenix. But considering where they were and considering where interest rates went, that's not that big of a discount. Considering interest rates were touching under 3%, what, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and now they got as high as 8,
Mhm.
and prices only came down a little bit. That's a little, I don't want to say scary, but if rates come back out into the fives, as you're thinking they're going to, the market's going to take off again. In my layman's thoughts,
No, and I think you're spot on. And what's going to happen is for a lot of people, they're going to price themselves out because they have not factored in the timing you said. They're trying to just come up with this perfect timing.
Right.
And the reality is what we tell people is let's go ahead and get you in right now. Let's qualify, let's get the payment where you want. But there are strategies of even buy downs where you can buy the interest rate down and kind of step up into it. One we're using today, without getting too granular, you can do rate buy downs where there's a 3-2-1, a 2-1 buy down. All that really means is if rates were 7 today, you could start as low as 4 or 5%. You could
Right.
use some of the seller's contribution, buy the rate down. So if payment is really what you're interested in, you could buy and keep that price down, because it would be hard to find any economist today that would tell you in 6 months that house you're looking at is going to be selling for less.
Right.
I've yet to find someone. Now that would take something to happen to the home, something to happen there. And then you have this phenomenon of we're going to see more than double the percentage of new homes that are taking up the inventory will be feeding the market. And so we have all these new homes. I've encouraged people, look, if a new home in the community works for you, you're going to have less maintenance, you're going to have less repairs, you're not going to have to be doing renovations because it's new. You might consider that as your option. And again, if you have a home and that good low rate, rent that out, move to a new construction would be great for people. Just because, again, we've done that a couple times in our buying is you don't really have to do anything to the home. It's move in, Don't have to
Yep.
renovate the kitchen, the bathroom, all the stuff that we all pour money into. And you probably have a little bit of built-in equity because in 6 months, 6 years, be thinking that way, what's that home going to be worth?
Totally. So tell me, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. Tell me about, I got to listen to a couple of episodes of your podcast this morning. I know you've been chugging along at that for what, about 3 years now, 4 years
Yeah, a little over
almost?
3 years.
Yeah. So tell us about the Brian Covey show.
Yeah. So we started off, and I used my name because Ed Milet had the Ed Milet show, and I thought,
Yeah.
well, Ed's doing it, man. I'm going to do it,
And
right?
he's doing it well. So
He's
yeah.
crushing it.
Yeah.
So, and you know this, like with any venture, we started to learn, okay, what are the guests that are coming on? Because I found that guest format, my intention was bring on these conversations that I was having with amazing humans that had these gifts and things that they could share. And we would just have wonderful conversations like we're having, and I would get to share their greatness and their expertise. Well, last year we rebranded it, Finding Your Competitive Edge, because what I started to realize is every one of the guests had a competitive edge about them. They had something in their past, like I shared in my story, that made them who they are today, that someone listening could relate to and go, yeah, well, maybe I didn't play pro sports, but I did love to compete over here. I was a musician over here and I learned this, or, I did this that was really difficult. And I wanted to showcase people's greatness, but also show when you find your competitive edge and then you're able to use that in the service of others and
Yeah.
you help more people because they know your story and you're open, the impact and what you're looking for is actually right in front of you. And so we're loving it. We bring on great guests all the time that are entrepreneurs. We still, I will tell you, have a pretty loyal following. We just crossed over 100,000 downloads and have
Nice.
had some just incredible people that I could go on and tell you about it, Ken, but go check it out because you'll probably find someone that you know.
Yeah,
We've
I
had some
did.
cool people, but the stories is what connects for me. Every time I leave, I learn something and I'm inspired by someone. And I'm like, man, God, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I had that conversation.
I'm the same way. And I honestly didn't expect it. I started a podcast to support our talent acquisition brand, period. So it was like Ken talking to other leaders.
Yeah.
And then I was like, this is really cool. Like if I don't do a podcast, if we do some back-to-back recordings and then I'm kind of dry for a couple of weeks, I'm like, I miss it, because it's like I get to, it's almost like I get to work with all the variety of different coaches and have different conversations and get different mentorship myself, so it's been amazing. And thanks for being one of those guys on this journey that's helped us out. And we'll make sure to put all the ways to connect with you and your company in our show notes. Any parting words for us?
I shared this yesterday. This was one that was really big for me. And it's a little bit separate from what we talked about, but it's been hitting lately is, a lot of people want to grow their influence. And so we're not talking about leadership is one of my pastor friends shared this is never let your influence grow wider than your character runs deep.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. Never let your influence, right? We all want to have impact on people. We want to help more people. We want to grow. We want to do that. The way to do that and the way we're really called to do that is to work on yourself,
Yeah.
build your character, continue to become that man or woman that God created you to be, use those talents, and then your influence will grow from there. And that's why you see the people that are successful today over the long run, it's because their character's deep.
I love it. It's almost like don't let your influence be a function of your ego, but rather a function of your contribution. And yeah, I love that. That's really cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Brother, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to meet you. And we'll talk soon. I'm sure our paths will cross again.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken.